Hi there, I'm John Kierstead from Arctic Spas Vancouver Island, and today I'm going to do a video that we haven't done yet that talks about when you drain and fill your hot tub. One of the things we do talk about is that when you have a saline-based system where you're using the salt in the water to generate the sanitizer, you don't drain and fill the spa nearly as often. So this is one of those ones where even if you had a detailed spa school when we first set up your spa, you might not know what you have to do when it does come time to drain and fill, because it could be 2 years down the road. So that's what this video is for. There's a few things that I do like to say. It is, why do you drain and fill it in the first place, right? So usually what happens is over time, your water can only absorb so much stuff. And so with the salt system, because we're not constantly adding stuff to the water to sanitize it, the water doesn't get as full as fast, which is the main reason why it doesn't drain and fill. However, we still do adjust the pH and we still introduce contaminants to the water as we use the spa. So over time, the water's slowly going to have an increase in its total dissolved solids, and eventually the water will get full. And you'll notice this because it becomes hard to manage. Maybe you can't keep your chlorine level right, or you can't keep the pH in line. Just basically becomes more, or maybe you get problems with foaming and stuff like that. These are all indicators that maybe it's time to drain the spa. So when you've reached that time and you've determined that, yeah, I need to drain this water, one of the things that we do recommend is that you flush the whole system, right? There's a lot of plumbing and stuff in here, and water can sometimes sit in spots depending on which jets you have on and off. And we just want to make sure that we get all of the biofilm and anything that built up on the pipes, flush any calcium and stuff like that that could collect on your heating element and maybe inside some of the fittings and that sort of thing. So there's two products that we carry, and there's others that you could use. One is Natural Chemistry. They have a product called Spa Purge. With the Arctic Pure line, we have a product called Fresh Start. Follow the directions, but basically they work the same in that you pour them in with the intentions of draining the water. This is not something you can use as a regular maintenance thing, because believe me, as soon as you put it in there, it starts to go to work immediately, and it's cleaning off all of the surfaces and inside of the pipes. It's scouring all that stuff, and stuff will come up. And the spa often will, we tell you to turn your jets on to high speed and really get the water moving. It often foams up, and it's not really pretty foam, but understand that that's the stuff that it's cleaning out of the lines and that, and then you're going to drain the spa. So draining the spa itself, we have a number of tools you can use. Almost all the spas, well, in fact, all the spas that we carry have an external drain system on them. There's a couple of different versions of that we'll show you. And this, you can attach your regular hose to that. And I will show you how to do that, but I want to show you a couple of ways that's even easier, because even though those fittings do make it a designated spot, it's really slow. So if you want to drain and fill it quickly, it's probably not your best bet. This is more of a turn it on, leave it overnight, and in the morning it'll be relatively empty, right? Because it's a slow process if you just attach to that. Now we have these vacuums. The smaller one is more, we call it quick vac. It's more for getting dust and debris, and for me, pine needles or fir needles out of my tub. It sucks them up fairly well. It's got a Big Brother version. This version is actually an excellent vacuum, but it moves a very large amount of water. So this can be very useful for draining. So basically, they've got a patented little gizmo on the end here. This one's a little dusty. Basically, it's just a little fitting that fits over here, so that when you put this in the water and you shake this up and down rapidly, it actually draws the water up and creates suction. Which means you don't have to do it the old-fashioned way. Although I often will just push this all the way into the water. I push this down, like you see me doing here, into the water, and then I push it so that the water comes up to the top of this, and it'll pop. And then if you put your hand over this and pull this out and then let go, it'll actually create the same draw as that shaking motion. If it doesn't quite catch, then you give the end a little bit of a shake, but then you can run this out. which brings up the question of, wow, we've got salt water in these spas, you know, should we be draining this onto the surface? Well, I want you to understand that that's, once again, one of those misconceptions of saltwater spas. This is actually saline. It's 0.8, 0.9% salt in there. So it's a very, very low concentration. So it's perfectly safe to use on your lawn. I drain on my lawn all of the time. It's just water. In fact, it's the same water and salt concentration that's in our human body. So it's safe to do. So yeah, you can just drain this straight out. It is good to have like you know, if you got a big spa and you're draining in the same spot, make sure that you're draining in an area that you don't want flooded or otherwise, because it is quite a lot of water that comes out of that. This is much faster than the method there, and it's because the size of this hose is much larger, so it can move a lot of water fast, and it takes time. At the same time, you can get most of the debris out of the bottom because you can vacuum it up with the piece there. There is another method that a lot of people use, which is just kind of the automated version. We have them actually, you can rent it, but you can also buy them. They're not that expensive. I think we sell them in most of the stores, and that's just a little submersible pump. And again, you just attach the one end of your hose to that and lay it to wherever you want to drain. And then as soon as you plug this in and drop it in there, it sucks the water up and pumps it out. And I find it's about the same speed as the tool, the vacuum tool there. We have in our vans, we actually have larger versions of these that can drain a spa in about 10 minutes. And we use that so that if we have to do some work on the spa, we can just drain it into an onion sack that we have and then fix your spa and then drain the water back in, right? So that's the methods for draining it. I'm going to show you a few other things that you need to consider when to drain it, okay? All right, I'll put that back there. So usually with the Fresh Start product or the other Purge product, you're going to run your pumps on high speed. I believe they have you cycle it so that you're going to run it maybe 2 or 3 cycles, so an hour or so, and then it's going to be really spongy, and then you're going to drain it. And then our recommendation is actually that you fill it again and drain it again to get all that stuff out of the water, right? So you can use any of the methods that you want. So I did say I was going to show you how this method worked. This is a valve. So when this is pulled out, it opens the valve on the inside, which allows the water to flow. Now, right now, the water's not going to flow. First of all, there's no water in this one, but if it had water in, because this cap is going to prevent it from doing that. So if I just go like this, water would start spurting out as I do this. But if this is pushed in, like so, it's closed, right? So that's the closed version there. Now I've gone and stuck it in there. There, got it out. And I can use the cap to pull it out. You can also attach the hose right here. Make sure I got it in there. So it's the female end of the hose, just attaches to this. Normally you want it plugged in. This hose isn't the right size head, so I have to have it out here. And then this just winds onto it. When it's in this position, it's going to flow out. The other version of this works kind of the same, only it's actually a female end, and you have to put the male end of the hose into it. This is the other drain kit that we have on the Arctic Spas. We've used this one for a number of years. They've switched to that other one that I told you about that is kind of the opposite. It has a male that a female end of the plug connects to. This one has uses the male end of the hose. So it usually has one of these when you first start, but we generally tell people to get rid of this, right? Because if you leave this in, you can actually have this in. And again, remember, this is a valve. The way this one works is you turn it. I have the pipe wrench there. You know, use this union type wrench. If this was really tight, you could use that to turn it on and off. But basically, this just opens and closes the valve, kind of like turning the tap on a faucet, right? So when it's counterclockwise, it's open. When I take this out, this is going to flow water. So if I don't want the water to flow and I want to put my hose in there, I'm going to have it closed. The one thing about this one I noticed is that when you take the male end of the hose, I usually wind the hose backwards. This hose is short, so it's easy, but when you've got a long one, I wind it the opposite way so that when this goes in here, it automatically wants to straighten. The reason is because if I twist the hose, if you have the whole hose like this, of course you can do this, but that's in there, right? And then if you want the water to drain, you open this up and it starts draining out. Right. Pretty simple. We've used these for a number of years. The big thing is don't leave them in the open position with the cap in. They can freeze that way and it can cause a real problem. It is important also on Arctics. You should run water through the drain from time to time, because if you have a spa buoy, there's a sacrificial anode on the other side of that, and we want to make sure that anode is always in water. The B-Well product uses this same valve, but their version of it, they don't go through the cabinet. The reason for that is because this could sometimes freeze. If you leave this in the open position, then the water can be right out to the end here. And if this was a freeze condition, this could freeze and burst and drain your spa. And that's not what you want. So you want to make sure that if you are using one of these valves, that it's always left in this position. Then the water's inside the insulated area of the cabinet, whether it's an Arctic or a B-Well. B-Well, they actually leave the whole fitting inside the cabinet, and I'll show you that. This is the B-Well. It's different than the 3 Arctic series, the Core, the Classic, and the Custom series. They all have the valve that's actually attached so that it sits on the edge of the cabinet. So it's on the cabinet on the outside. So you don't actually have to do the step that you have to do with the B-Well, which is on a B-Well, I have to remove this door, which I've already gone and done. I've removed this door, and this is usually tucked up in behind the cabinet here, and you can just see it's a drain. And what you want is you want to attach your hose. So this is the exact same fitting that we saw on the other ones. Normally the cabinet's here, right, where my hand is. And so you just hold this piece. It's the same on-off check valve that opens and allows the water to flow out. You generally want to try to get this as low as possible. I probably would have been better to open the side door and take it from there so that I could keep this nice and low, which is what I would do if this was actually full of water and I needed to drain right down to the bottom, right? This just pulls out. You want to take this cap off and take the female end of your hose into here. If you have one that has a cover like this on it, it's not going to fit in here, so you will actually find this a little bit more difficult, where you're going to have to utilize this piece, pull it out, and then you're going to have to actually plug this. You're going to get a little bit wet as you try to get this piece to come on. So once again, a lot of the times all this extra work is very easy to avoid, which is what I do when I use either that vacuum or just a sump pump. Sump pump it out. It's much faster than this, but this is the way you have as an alternate way of draining it if you want. Another consideration is if you have spa buoy on your spa. When it comes time to drain the spa, we have an expensive piece of equipment that needs to be protected from drying out, right? So that's this probe. In fact, that's what this little bottle on the end here, this has actually got liquid inside there to make sure that the end of this probe stays wet. Now normally, this probe is behind a grate in your spa, right? So normally it would sit right in here. There'd be a grate there, and then you'd see just the tip of the glass probe, right? So on a running spa, there'd be a glass probe in here. And so what we want to do is we want to take this grate off, and the plug that came with the spa, this was plugged in. You plug this in while the water's in it, before you drain, so that there's water still contained within the chamber there. So now that water's in there. So when you drain the spa, there's water sitting inside this, which protects that piece from getting dried out, right? So that's what we mean when we say cap off this. The other side, there's two of these in most of our spas. The other one won't have the probe in it, and you'll notice too that it has bubbles that come out of it all the time, because that's your peak ozone wall fitting, right? So normally this is the wall fitting that the ozone, but they have the same cap on them. right? So this is the same cap as would be for the probe. So you'll have to look inside and see which ones, or just note which one's the bubbles coming out of and note that the other one is where the probe sits, okay? Very important that you do that before you drain a spa with Spa Boy. You do not want to dry out that tip, otherwise it may not work properly. And this is a pretty expensive item, so you don't want to be replacing it, okay? Although they are replaceable, you don't have to drain the spa to replace it. And they often need to be cleaned as well. So when you drain and fill is a good time to take a look at it. This is the probe. It's usually inside of a wall fitting, right? And then there's a grate in front of this. So when you take that grate off, you can see this. And sometimes little bits of debris and stuff gets in here. I've also seen calcium buildups and stuff on here. And so what I like to do is I actually have even smaller paintbrushes, like the fine paintbrushes, and then I just, gently clean that area off. Right? You have to be gentle with this. If you break this, your probe won't work anymore. So just gently clean it, right? This is the probe that has to stay wet. So when it comes from the factory, right, it has this little bottle. The little bottle has fluid in there, just water, distilled water. There, and that just keeps it from fouling, right? So you could take this out, and we recommend if people shut down their spa over the winter, you got to take this out and do exactly this to it to keep it wet during that time. Of course, if you cap this and it's winter time, the whole thing can freeze, and you can end up freezing the whole wall fitting and stuff. So you don't want to do that. If you are not running the spa in the winter, remove this from the spa, drain the spa properly, and then make sure that the end has this little piece on it. That's it. Paintbrush, clean it up, right? If you did notice calcium on there, you could also soak this in a little bit of a vinegar solution or the cell cleaner, which is citric acid, just for a little bit, and again, give it a little bit of rub down, and then reinstall it. You'll be good. It's a little more difficult to do that when this is already installed on the spa. If it's already in the spa and underwater, just use the brush gently to gently remove the debris from it. You could lightly wipe with a microfiber cloth as well, just to make sure that the optical sensor there is good, but be gentle with it. You could break that glass off. If you break that little glass piece off, this is no good, and they're quite expensive, so you don't want to be breaking it if you don't have to. That's the drain part of the video. The second thing that we want to do is figure out when we fill this. So there's two ways that you can do it. You can fill through the valve that you drain from, but I find that the easiest place to fill through is actually in the filter itself. So you take out one of the filter bins, right? And there'd normally be a filter in here. I take the filter cartridge out, and in the bottom there, it's kind of hard to see, but there's actually a hole in there. So I feed the end of the hose into there, and that's what I want the hose into here, because then it's going to fill all of these jet lines and stuff first, and it will reduce the number of airlocks you get, right? And we're going to have another video just on airlocks, just how to get rid of them and stuff. But sometimes what happens is the water or the air in the lines gets trapped with the water being in there, and if that gets into the pump, it'll stop the pump from working properly, and the pump will just kind of hum and stuff, and you'll think something's wrong with my spa, but basically it just needs to be burped, right? So usually if you loosen off the union, it'll burp the pump, and then everything will be fine, right? But if you fill from the filter area, plumbing out, it'll fill and prevent that from happening. We do have on the Arctics, we have an auto purging system that's designed to prevent airlocks from happening, but they can still happen. So it's one of those things that if you fill properly, generally you won't get an airlock, right? Then people often wonder, well, where do I fill it up to? So I either tell people halfway up the filter bucket or just below the pillows, right? In most of the spas. And if it's a little deeper or a little less, it's not that big of a deal. The one thing you do want to do is don't turn anything on until the water level is at least halfway up this area here, so that that water can actually get in. Otherwise, you'll pull in air and you'll get that airlock thing we were talking about. So that's why you don't want to do it. So make sure your tub is full before you turn it on. That's the moral of the story. Okay. Typically on a Arctic, you're going to heat up about 8 degrees an hour, and so depending on whatever your water temperature is going in there, it's going to heat up. We don't recommend you put the salt in until the water's warm. Some people are eager, so you could dissolve the salt in warm water and then pour it in if you really want to get it going fast. But generally, if you wait until the tub's at least 80, pour the salt in, let it dissolve fully before you make any adjustments for anything else, right? So just get the salt in there. It'll start smoking usually if it's an onsen system like on this spa, it'll start smoking based on time. If it's a spa boy system, it'll start smoking based on whatever the chlorine level is in the water, right? So if it's a call for chlorine, it's going to come on and produce that in the tub itself. And that's basically it. Once the tub is up to temperature and you've had the salt fully dissolved, you'll then work on setting your pH. Again, with a Spa Boy system, there is a pH meter there telling you where your pH is at, and that's usually something that is fairly accurate in comparison to the strips. That said, it is good to get used to using strips or the drops as a backup checking measure. A lot of you use these test strips. It's important that you use them correctly. The sensors that are on like the Spa Boy systems and stuff that actually read pH, that's a medical grade sensor, and when they're calibrated properly, they're very accurate. So a lot of times these things expire. Also, I always tell people just take one out and then close it. If you get any water or moisture inside this packet here, it can cause all of them to misread. Basically, each of these little pads has a reagent on it that reacts to what's in the water, and that's how we can tell what these do. So it's important that you don't let the reagents run into each other. So you want to read the thing flat, right? Horizontal, like this. So a lot of times people, when they take this out, what you want to do is you want to plunge it in, lift it up, and turn it this way as quickly as possible in one motion without flicking the water and stuff off and without the reagents mixing, right? So I'm going to show you how we do that. Here, I just take this in. I find a spot where the water's not moving. In this case, we're lucky the spa is in an off position right now. I just dip it in. It's a 1 second dip, and then as soon as possible, I turn it horizontal. And I don't let any of the water and reagents run into each other, right? So we can see here that, yeah, it's got plenty of chlorine. The pH is a little bit high, and the alkalinity is fine, right? It's in that range, right?
Towards me a little bit more.
You can see. And it usually says you got to wait 15 seconds or so we could still wait a little bit longer as it continues to react. This is a showroom spa, so it doesn't get used that much, so it's not uncommon for it to be on the higher range in the chlorine. But you notice there's still no smell or anything like that because it's the free chlorine state for this, right? pH is high, so I definitely want to be adjusting this down, and we do that by just adding some pH decreaser into the water. You can use like cleaning vinegar would work. I use citric acid or muriatic acid. Right now I'm using muriatic acid, which is a lesser form of hydrogen chloride, the HCl. So we use that to bring my pH down because I have a big swim spa, and so I don't need to add very much of it to bring the pH down. And that's common. In any salt system, the pH is always going to creep up. Why we want to make sure that we get this pH into the proper range is that this is when, if there's any metals and stuff in the water, this is when they'd come out and you'd end up with scale and stuff on the side. Luckily, there's nothing showing at all. The electrode looks nice and clean, so I don't think it's a problem. But we do need to adjust that down. So I'm going to do that right now. All right, so I'm going to actually just use vinegar. I actually prefer the cleaning vinegar. You got to use more if you use regular vinegar. Some people don't like using vinegar because you do get a little bit of a vinegar smell initially. But vinegar is one of the things you can actually use to wipe down the spa. So if you get like a line on the edge, this with a microfiber cloth, you can use the vinegar. Same for underneath the cover and the lid of the cover, so you can wash this with the vinegar. And we know that any of the vinegar that ends up getting in the water is just going to counteract the pH increasing. So we saw that it was fairly high. This is just regular store vinegar, so it's not very concentrated, so it's going to take quite a bit of it to bring our pH in range. So that was about 2 cups as a guesstimate. And then I know it, I'm going to check it in a little while and see what our pH has done, but that's going to bring the pH down, which is going to make it so that we're not going to have to worry about metals coming out of solution. It also means that your chlorine is going to work better. When your chlorine, or when your pH is in the ideal range, the chlorine production is at its maximum capability, and its best performance for actually dealing with pathogens in the water. So that's what you want to do. And that's really draining and filling the spa. You get your spa ready. Spa Boy is just going to go to whatever setting you had before. If you have Onsen or you have a Saltron Mini, then your startup's a little bit different. As you know, those work on time. And we're going to do a separate video on how you can program your Onsen. But basically with both of them, the key is if you use the spa more or you have more people using it, then you need to have it run longer. Whereas with these automated systems, they're always just measuring how much chlorine's in the water and adjusting automatically based on if you use it a lot, they'll come on more often. If you use it less, they'll come on less often. But the ones with time, it's really important that you remember to increase it when you use it more, and very important to remember to reduce the output when you're not using it as often, because you don't want the chlorine level to go crazy in here, because that can cause lots of other problems in your spa. So I'm John Kierstead from Arctic Spas Vancouver Island. Thank you for watching this video. And please, if you have any questions, go on to our website and post your questions there so that we can do more videos specifically answering the questions that you have.